Hi, it's Sherry Roberts back with another episode of Newsmakers TV Journal of the Plague Year. And today we're going to talk about some of the turmoil and drama at City Hall with two fellas who know of what they speak. Randy Rowse served, I think, 9 years on the city council, and he operated a business in Santa Barbara for nearly 40 years. Pat McElroy, a long time, he was the fire chief for the last 3 years of his career, about 37 years, as I recall. And both of them got out 2 steps ahead of the posse in terms of this overlay of crises that we see at City Hall, the pandemic, the economic problems, and the social unrest about the anti-racism movement. Let me start by asking each of you the same question. How do you think City Hall has functioned during this period, specifically the city administrator and also the city council? Pat, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I obviously, this is a critical mass for any time that I've been around the city. I haven't seen anything quite like the 1, 2, 3, 4 punch that's going on right now. I think that there's been some stars in this that are in the department levels. I think that there's obviously been some problems that resulted in the retirement of community development director. But I think it's important, I think Randy will echo this too, is that about 85% of the city is functioning pretty high right now. I'm talking about emergency services, public service. Public Works is doing astonishing work right now. Harbor Parks and Rec. So there's some real good work being done that's being lost in the discussion about community development. And what scares me is that obviously with the studies that have been done of community development, the grand jury report, there's been a roadmap delivered to fixing what the perceived and actual problems are. What I get concerned about is there's an opportunity for people to get some things that they've always wanted because things are in disarray. And that's what I'm looking at right now. And when I hear this constant talk about fire this guy, fire that guy, fire her, it starts to worry me, because is that really how the entire city feels? Or is this just a drumbeat of a few people?
Yeah. So Randy, build on what Pat said, but also it seems like since you left the council particularly, and it was even starting before, the council members or some council members are kind of being more individualistic, outspoken about specific staff members, which seems unusual. What's your take on it all?
Well, you know, it's really tempting to Monday morning quarterback, and what Pat said was exactly right. There's more going on on the direction of council and the city than everything all at once that I've ever seen. One of the difficult things is we do have a lot of positives that we can build on, and those are really not being recognized or being overshadowed by a few negatives. So the tail's wagging the dog right now. It's unfortunate. It shouldn't be that way. We really should acknowledge what we do have in terms of public safety and community and public works, the things that are really positive in this town. What's been hard, Jerry, for me, as you know, I was an at-large, and I was also a district. And the districting thing has not gone well, not in terms of personnel, but in terms of perception of what each responsible council member should be doing. They all function at large all the time, but sometimes they think as district, or they're told to think as district people, and that's just not the case. That was an elective mechanism, supposedly to solve a problem, which I don't think that's obviously not done much. So I think that makes it hard. That misunderstanding between both citizens and council members has made the job even more difficult, especially now with all the external pressures and the fact we're having virtual, not face-to-face meetings. I think that's hard.
I think that's right. It's a different experience to have somebody right in front of you making an allegation and being able to do it from here. Well, I mean, let's cut to the chase. I mean, Pat, do you think the knives are out for Paul Casey, sort of behind the scenes, or do you think it's specific members? Or what do you think is going on? I take it you think Casey's doing a pretty good job.
There's well-meaning people that just will disagree with me on this, but I do think Paul's doing a good job under difficult circumstances. That doesn't mean that there isn't things that the complaints that people have that aren't valid that need to be addressed. But let's not forget this council just gave him an excellent review at the end of 2019. But I don't want to beat a dead horse with this thing, but we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, a reckoning over racism, a crisis in housing and homelessness, natural disasters related to climate change. So the solution is, let's fire everyone. Let's fire the guy we don't like. Okay, what's plan B? That's what I want to hear is, you're getting rid of somebody that's been doing this for a long time. What's plan B? This isn't something we can fire our way out of. Once you start using a hammer, everything's going to start looking like a nail. So who's next? A fire inspector who didn't do what you wanted to do? A police sergeant? A streets supervisor running a paving program? Where does it stop? And you hear about letters being passed around and people being asked to sign them. And when you have somebody doing that, saying, hey, we got 3 of them in our pocket, talking about city council people, there's something wrong.
So, Randy, is there in fact a change about calling out people, saying this guy should be fired, that guy should be fired? I don't remember you ever doing that. I mean, it's sort of the governance model. What is the role of the council in all this? How deep into it are they supposed to get in personnel matters? Do you see a change going on there that's not healthy?
Well, once again, there's a public perception. I mean, I was part of the team that hired Paul Casey, and he's a big lad. I don't need to defend him, but his job is made more difficult by I think that the fact we're paying attention to a small, very noisy group. Like Pat said, I'd say 90% of the city is hitting on all cylinders. We had before this pandemic, we had all of our reserves topped up at the council at mandates of 25%. We were putting money away into a capital sinking fund. We've got Measure C going. Unless you've been living at home and not driving around, the streets are all torn up because we're doing a ton of great work. We're doing all the maintenance we've had to do for all these years. And Paul orchestrates all that. Paul hired a fabulous police chief. I mean, exactly the right person we needed for this time in history. So I really think the noise over, Pat's right. There are legitimate concerns brought up by certain people. My criticism right now is that we're not giving the rest of everybody the credit they deserve for going in and doing their jobs every day and doing them well and being really dedicated public servants, from PD, fire, public works. We're focusing on this group that's been really, really noisy, and they've had a lot of influence with council, more than I would like to see.
And the group is certain land developers. Ed St. George, of course, is circulating a petition to fire Casey and some of the State Street commercial property owners who are not happy. Pat, when you say certain people are trying to get their way, is that what you're talking about? Is that who you're talking about?
Well, I'm not gonna call out names right now. It's just the way it's being done, and you know this as well as anybody. Since I retired, I deliberately stayed away from anything to do with talking about the city, commenting on it, being involved in anything that's going on. But I'm really disappointed in a few people over at City Hall that are engaging in rumor mongering and disloyalty and gossip. And this personal posturing for upward movement is really unseemly. And the divisiveness that this has caused is exactly the opposite of what's needed right now. And these people aren't invisible. And it's not like there's some of us that don't know that this is going on. And it's caused some of us, I think Randy would agree with this, to say we just can't sit here and watch this anymore without commenting about it. We've been inside the city. We know how the personalities work, how they mesh and don't mesh. And it's just, as a citizen, I'd be ashamed of myself if I didn't pop off now and again. And this is the time for me.
Yeah. Randy, Pat mentioned Measure C, the 2017 sales tax increase that we all voted for ourselves. And I know you were a reluctant supporter of it at first. You're not a big tax increase guy, but you did go out and campaign for it. And, specifically because it was going to be used for the roads and also to build a police station. Now, in the last couple of weeks, amid the Black Lives Matter controversy and so on, it seems that there's some backing off or confusion about what Measure C is. What have you thought of as you've watched that debate?
Well, the first thing I think about, Jerry, is confidence for the voters. And the voters, one reason why I was a little goosey about Measure C going in was we didn't put a sunset clause on it like I wanted. And then later on, council adapted the project labor agreement, which I was pretty upset about capital projects. Now that's still all, in a kind of an amorphous state right now. But as far as the statements, as far as the PD building and whatnot, there's a lot of very passionate rhetoric going on. Frankly, that money wasn't needed currently for police station. If we can finish off the library plaza, I think that's a fabulous way to go. Another capital project is part of Measure C. But the voters were pretty loud and clear. They wanted the roads fixed and they wanted a police station. And that was, Bendy White and I went out around and did the Randy Bendy show all over town. And that's precisely what we were told. And that's what the polling data showed. And that was finally what the ballot box showed, was the voters wanted that. And, they were very willing to add that point sales tax on to do that. So I think that I'm not too worried about what's been said or done so far. I would worry about it if I thought I saw money physically being diverted. I don't see that. I think there were just talk and passion and response. And like I said, the virtual format has been really, really, really hard because you're focused on one guy. I don't even know what kind of faces McElroy's making right now. I don't trust him for a minute, but
Put your gallery view on. You can see it's really spectacular.
If I knew how to do that, I probably would.
Another thing, Jerry, about Measure C is over 24,000 people voted on Measure C. It won 54 to 42. So that's a big number in a city election. And if you look at the election, and it's like Randy, I think there's some really fine people on city council, and anybody that runs for office and is elected to represent deserves respect. But there isn't anybody that got within a small percentage of the 12 or 13,000 people that voted yes on Measure C. And about the police station, the last police station, the current headquarters of the police station, was built in 1959 after a 1958 bond measure. Does anybody think that the policing that goes on in that building is the same as it was in 1959, which was before the Voting Rights Act, before the Civil Rights Act, any of those things? Do you think the same type of policing that was done in 59 is being done there in 2020? So one of the things that I think about, and I've talked to Chief Luna about this, is with all the stuff going on with Black Lives Matter, with the structural issues, what kind of police station or public safety building or community, whatever the building you want to call the building, what is possible to happen there? What type of community-based organizations could find a home there? What type of things that deal with homelessness, mental illness, that could be part of that building? I mean, we're only limited by our imagination on what the public wants, what this community wants from that portion of public safety or social services. So stopping the construction of a building is a missed opportunity if what you want as a community group could be represented inside of that building. So why don't we start taking a bigger look and look at how a facility, how infrastructure can be used for better policing, better social services, more social justice, all of those things. They're all possible if we will it as a community. And just closing the door on things because of something that's there's an opportunity here I'd hate to see the community miss, and I mean the whole community.
Randy, what about the police department? Because we hear these calls to, quote, defund the police. Obviously, the meaning is, they're doing some social services stuff. Maybe they shouldn't, but there's a whole range of opinion on what that means. I mean, what's your take on how the chief was doing? She really took a lot of heat, and the department. And, do you think it's a good idea to defund the police?
Well, first of all, I'll repeat what I said before, and is that we have precisely the right chief at this time in history for what everything is going on. She's into restorative policing. She's into community policing. She's into implicit bias training. She's embraced all of the non-sworn people we have out there in the form of ambassadors, and she's got another group of volunteers and the blue shirts and the yellow shirts. That wasn't always the case. When we tried to launch those volunteers or those non-sworn forces before, we had met resistance. And now they're using it as a multiplier for their presence, for other duties like, just small citations and or perhaps someday they'll be running traffic, accident reports, that kind of thing. There's a multitude of things. You can repurpose some of what goes on with the sworns, non-sworns. Defunding makes no sense at a time when what we want is more training, more time to work with police that are different than in the traditional policing roles we thought of since the 40s and 50s, like what Pat was saying. Our police force is also more than double than it was back in that time, including all the personnel and dispatch and everything else that goes on. So the defunding thing makes no sense. I've never, ever, ever in this community heard anybody saying, I wish we had less police presence. Especially like even the folks like you talked about on state that are complaining about things in community development. They're also the people that were complaining to me about the lack of police presence and control on State Street. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, and then the last part is the elephant in the living room are the PERS situations. And those have eaten up a lot of the budget, and they're skyrocketing still. And this last setback in the market is going to exacerbate that situation even more. So, on no level, on no sense, any kind of defunding make sense to anyone at all. It was a catchphrase, it was a statement, but there's no practical application where that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. You work pretty closely with Lori Luna. What do you think she's getting a bad rap in here?
Well, I don't think she's getting the support she should have gotten from council, and any recognition that some of the programs that Randy talked about are already in place. But I might differ a little bit here with Randy on the defunding the police issue, which I think has as a term of description, it has a lot to be desired. But if you look at things that the duties of police have absorbed because nobody else wanted to, dealing with the homeless, dealing with the mentally ill on the street, all of these types of things. And that goes for fire too. That is money that, I understand. I don't understand completely because it's not my experience, but in terms of what's happening with Black Lives Matter and institutional racism, it's a good time for me to shut up and listen. And that's what I'm trying to do, because there's a lot out there that needs to be, that we need to learn about what's going on. But on another thing, well, really briefly, the grand jury released their thing on homelessness yesterday. And one of the frustrating things for me during my career was trying to get people to understand that the way police services and fire and EMS services are delivered, if you think the homeless the homeless issue is not affecting you because of where you live, you're wrong. Because if we're responding to numerous medical emergencies or with homeless, and you have a heart attack or you have a problem at your home or you have a traffic accident, you have to understand that if these engines or rescues are tied up, they don't get to just sit there and go, well, that call sounds more exciting, I'm going to leave this guy here and go. You're obligated to stay with that patient. And I'm sure it's true with the police officers too. So people don't understand that while they may not have homeless on their street or in their yard, it still impacts them because the services that they paid for, the system is stressed beyond the way it should be, and services that they think are available to them are delayed because they are dealing with those issues. So it is a community-wide issue. It's a nationwide issue, and we have to start looking at it in that way.
Hey, Randy, from your perspective as a businessman, as a business owner, you've unfortunately sold the Paradise Cafe, so I can't get a good table there whenever I need. But that aside, do you think, and I know you had some concerns that because of the endorsement of the Democratic Party sort of becoming much more important in a district election system, that partisanship was taking a bigger role, that people weren't really looking at the city as a whole in a nonpartisan way. Do you think that there's a problem right now with business being represented, with small business particularly, people who are understanding and sympathetic to that on the council?
Yeah, that's a dynamic question, Jerry. But I, as you know, from the get-go, I've always eschewed the party platform, either one, Republican, Democrat, or whatever. And I don't think either influence belongs in City Hall. And it just, turns out that that's kind of where we're at right now. And in terms of business, as you look at how you handle things like policing, taxation, regulation, all those things, they may or may not be directly dealt with on a city council level, but it does influence the overall flavor of how we do things. What is important? I mean, are we developing social programs, or are we developing an atmosphere of regulation that has its openings for business to survive? In our job, our highest and best use, as far as I was on council concerned, is to get out of the way. Do what you can to control what you do, but don't control everything, and try to get out of the way and be as little as a hindrance as possible. I mean, it's kind of this idea where now businesses is trying to gang up and fire people or do whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's that lack of esprit de corps about the city that's really concerning right now, and it's a difficult time.
Yeah. Hey, Pat, I want to ask you a question about the mayor. I remember the morning after the debris flow, you were still the chief, and talking to you in the hallway while the city council meeting went on, and you kind of had to sit there and cool your heels to give a report on what had actually happened while we had a cookie and milk celebration of the mayor and so on and so forth. And Kathy got a lot of heat during that time for sort of being invisible. And it's sort of repeated itself in this. How do you think that she has done in terms of visibility and rallying the city and kind of providing the leadership that we need?
Well, going back to the debris flow, I didn't have a problem at all with Kathy's posture during that. I think that it was appropriate. I think that if you think back to that time, a lot of local political presence was very subdued, and I think appropriately, because that's the gravity of the disaster. It wasn't a time, unless it was going to be, you had something productive to be out there saying anything. And frankly, the people that were running the disaster response had things. They were top 5 people, both locally and statewide and nationally. So I don't have any problem with that. I think I think it. One of the things I think is kind of sad is that, you know, a lot of these issues were Kathy's bread and butter. That where she's, I mean, if anybody would have had a natural place out in the street with the people marching, I mean, Kathy had earned the right to do that. And I think it's kind of unfortunate that her history on social issues was, people look the other way on it. And I think that's unfortunate, but it's still an ongoing thing. This isn't over tomorrow. I mean, this is people, you know, this is something that you're going to have to prove yourself over the long run. And that's one of the things that I think of now is, hey, everybody take the temperature down a little bit. I'm on, especially on city issues, on the social injustice issues, on those things. I know the urgency is there, and those things have to move quickly. But in terms of how we manage as a city and the things that we can control, let's have good deliberate conversation and good policy that comes out of that deliberative conversation. Because right now, this council's got to find each other, because it seems too much that there's, you know, 2 over here, 3 over here, 4 over here, 5 over here, and they're not speaking with a unified voice. And if there's anything that I hope happens as things cool down a little bit, is that council starts working together to develop policy that then the city administrator, as appropriate, enacts. He's able to marshal the forces of the different departments to enact policy as directed by city council. And right now, I don't see that this council has found itself where they're going to speak with a unified voice about the way to move forward.
You agree with that, Randy, that it's just kind of political chaos is really hurting us in this situation?
Yeah, I don't want to lay it all on just council as individuals, because they have faced an extraordinary amount of external forces that, you know, no council I don't think has faced simultaneously before. I also think that the virtual meeting makes it really hard. I think that is hard to become a team over the internet. So that part's hard. But like I said, there's a lot of external pressures. Pat, earlier in the program, mentioned people actually trying to take advantage of the situation. And I think I see that as well. I see people, you know, seeing the blood in the water, so to speak, in terms of everything, and a little bit of, you know, cognitive dissonance and confusion, and their ability to jump in and try to make changes that they want from whatever they're doing. But on balance, the city really still is in really good shape. And as far as, you know, Kathy's handling of, I was there for that meeting, and that was a very long, bizarre day. Pat had mud on his boots still as he was giving his presentation to us, and it was our opening day of council, the first, you know, so it was a heck of a way to start out. And frankly, I have a little bit of an issue with politicians taking too much of a center stage as opposed to these public safety people. I don't really want to hear from our elected officials too much in those situations. I want to hear from the people that are out there actually rescuing people and doing the barricades and the kind of work that it takes to recover from something like that. So I think that it was handled within our own emergency operations center. And as far as council goes and the membership and the mayor, I think they did as good a job as they could have done.
Yeah. All right, we got like
one more
2 minutes left. Let me just ask you to wrap up. I mean, I think your quote is, "What's Plan B?" I mean, what's your takeaway on the current situation?
Well, it's a hell of a time to switch the person in charge of running 1,000 employees if you don't have Plan B. What is Plan B? Is it an inside person? Is it somebody coming from the outside? You know, with Paul, I understand that people could have problems with him, but this guy's got a quarter century of understanding how the levers of power work in Santa Barbara and how to get things done. Is he going to satisfy everybody? No. But is this the right time to kick him to the curb just because of all the stuff going on? I don't think so. I think if people want to have a discussion about it, fine, but let's not, do it in the middle of a global pandemic, an economic crisis, a social justice crisis. It's just not the time.
All right. Last word goes to you, Randy. You said earlier that the problem is the tail's wagging the dog now. What does that mean, and what should be done about it?
Well, kind of what Pat was saying, and I think a banana republic functions that way. They have a coup d'état, and all of a sudden they have a void of authority, a void of direction, and next thing you know, they're right back down to where they were before. Paul is incredibly capable. His institutional knowledge is without match. He tends to sit in the background and have council make the policy decisions, which they're supposed to do. He does hire, council hires and fires Paul and Ariel, and then, they take care of everything else from there. But to sit there and say this 10% of the city isn't functioning to our satisfaction when the rest of it is going along pretty darn well, and especially in these times, it's wrong thinking. It's reactionary. It's not productive. It's punitive and not productive. I want to see people with solutions. I want to see people to say, when we do this, then that. And that's not what we're getting right now. Let's do this and see what happens. Well, that's not a way to run an airline. Not going to do it.
All right. Pat McElroy, Randy Rowse, thank you very much for your wisdom and your thoughts and, your political analysis. I really appreciate it. You guys know what you're talking about. And I thank you for taking the time to come on and give us your perspective.
Well, hopefully we behaved ourselves. That's always a question.
Yeah, we'll have to do something about that next time.
At least we kept it clean, Jerry.
Yeah.
Thanks.